Okay, so all credit goes to Slather for this video. I just felt that I didn't want to do an entire talking video over nothing, or just me clicking around Royale for no reason. But I wanted to establish something that I have been asked in multiple comments and whatnot, and it's why I don't do beginner videos, or why, like, oh, here's a video idea. Why don't you do like a beginner video? Why don't you do like a beginner guide for people who are just starting? And I had this very long conversation about this thing, about this exact topic in my clan, about why I don't do beginner videos. And it went back and forth, and essentially I got out of that conversation with a very clear idea of what kind of YouTuber I am in regards to the Royale community. And I have established within myself that I am a mid-tier level YouTuber. That is what I am. That is what I will continue to be. The amount of time that it will take me to go from a mid-tier to a, like end game, A-Friend Gaming, Muck, Godlike Mike, that kind of YouTuber, to do that kind of content with like max level everything and just rotate out videos of like, oh, this is max tier Demon Hunter gameplay, and this is max tier Inquisitor gameplay, and this is max tier Blade Dancer gameplay. The amount of time that it would take for me to get to that point is so far, like, I have a pretty well-established account, but even then it would take so long for me to get there, that I feel very confident in saying that I'm a very mid-tier level YouTube creator. And let me explain. In regards to why I don't do beginner content, why I don't do like a free-to-play guide, or a free-to-play, like, I just started, I'm in Arena 6, what kind of deck should I build? The reason why I can't do that kind of content is not necessarily because I'm beyond that. Like, I'm obviously on this account, I am beyond an Arena 5, and that's not the actual reason. The actual reason is, even if I were to start a new account, it's all dependent on what I would get out of legendary chests, because legendary chests are random. And so if I were to wait in order to get a Dryad, for example, like if I didn't pull a legendary chest to where like Frost was my first legendary, right? Even if I were to wait, which is what I did on my free-to-play account, by the way, even if I were to wait to pull a better legendary, and I just didn't use it like early on, to where most people would pull the first legendary the first chance they got, and they would get Frost because Frost is the only thing available at that point. If I were to wait and I got Dryad as my first legendary, that would change the course of my entire my quote-unquote beginner guide. Because at that point, if I got Dryad, or if I pulled like an Inquisitor in that beginner guide, that quote-unquote beginner guide, I would say, oh, I got Inquisitor, just play Inquisitor, it's the best card, there's no reason to play anything else. And at that level, it would be correct information. I find that whenever people say, make a beginner guide, or help me make a deck for this arena, or for this league, what they're essentially asking for is, play the game for me. And that I simply can't do. I can give specific advice between cards. I can give you, tips on how to use your gems. I can give you tips on what's the best, thing to do to create money, right? To create gold. What's the most efficient way to create gold? I can give you like mid-tier level tips, but what I can't do is play the game for you. And I find that a lot of people that ask quote-unquote beginner questions, or help me build this deck type questions, help me do this, I find that most of the time, what they really need is just to play the game and make mistakes. I find that if you are not in the 4,000 trophy range, where you're going into leagues to where you have every card available, if you are still before that point in the game, in your game, if you haven't reached that point in the game, you should continue playing the game and struggle. And I don't say that as a mean thing to say. I mean to say, I feel like most players, if they were going to drop out of this game, they would drop out at that point. At which point, it's fine. Not every game is for everybody. If you don't like the idea of building a deck, if you don't like the idea of reading cards and understanding how they work and using them and seeing that they work or maybe that they don't work, and changing it out and exchanging it with something else and getting, like units and getting things. If you don't like that idea, you're not going to like the rest of the game, because the rest of the game, as you obtain more and more cards, those decisions just become more and more complicated. If you ask somebody what's the difference between a trapper, a chemist, and an enchant sword, what's better? The enchant sword, probably, in most cases, but in some cases, the trapper is better. But maybe you only want one thing on your field as opposed to the amount of trappers that you would need, because maybe you have a scrapper, and at which point chemist is the best choice. Because if your deck is running scrapper, you can't run trapper and enchant sword, because then the scrapper hits would go to the enchant sword and the trapper. But that's not to say that the chemist is best, because what's best is what's best for you at your specific time in your deck, at your card levels. Do you have a level 9 enchant sword? If you don't have a level 9 enchant sword, maybe trapper is better. How high is your trapper? Maybe a max chemist is better than a level 7 trapper. The decisions that you will then have to make over the course of your game and over the course of time that you play this game become more and more complicated as you go along. And I can make some of those decisions easier as you progress through the game and as you find, but if your questions are like, what is a trapper? What is a chemist? What is an enchant sword? I feel like you need to keep playing the game in order to get to a point where I can try to answer the question, which one is better? And I find that most beginner players are just trying to grasp the game. And I find that most beginner players are probably not going to stay with the game. I think a lot of players, being in clans and just being in multiple different clans over the course of my time playing this game, I find that a lot of players maybe play this game really hard for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then they stop playing the game. Like, life just happens and, stuff happens and you drop out of games. I've dropped out of a number of games in my life playing mobile games. And I wouldn't fault anybody for stopping this game. But see, that's just the thing. I think as a beginner player, there's a point where you have to make a choice of whether or not you are going to continue with this game. And by continue with this game, it has to be beyond 4,000 trophies. You have to at least get to the point where you've beaten enough people to where you have access to getting any card. It's not a matter of being free to play or pay to play. You just have to have a willingness to want to play the game as a beginner player. And I feel like if I were to attempt to make a guide for a beginner player, if I were to make it's essentially what it comes down to, and this was my argument with the person in my clan, is that it basically comes down to a tier list, which I already have, by the way. Essentially, it comes down to a tier list. Like, what should I use in the beginning? And I feel like an engineer deck is really good in the beginning. But let's say you have like a really good sharpshooter, or you have a really good hunter, and you haven't gotten enough engineer parts, then maybe a sharpshooter is better. But these choices would vary so much between so many people, because it's all based on so many different factors. It's based on whether or not you spend in this game. It's based on whether or not what cards you've leveled up in this game. Because a level 7 engineer deck wouldn't be as good as a level 7 Boreas deck. But like maybe like a level 8 or a level 9 Engineer deck might be better than a Boreas. But that's not to say Engineer is better. Just in this instance, very early on in the game, a level 9 Engineer is a better deck than a Boreas deck. But then if you get Boreas and Grindstone, that all of a sudden becomes better than the Engineer deck. But neither of these cards are good late game or mid game. Maybe Boreas Grindstone is maybe a little bit better than a Engineer deck. But see, like what I'm trying to say is all of these decisions that I would make in a quote unquote beginner guide would all be correct choices. They would all be correct technically. But then all of a sudden, if you use that information as gospel and you use that information and you say, okay, he said that Boreas is really good, I'm going to run Boreas for the rest of my game here. Boreas drops off very quickly and it's not a top tier card. If I said that Engineer was the best card as a beginner player, it is, but you also need to know how to play it. At which point then I would then need to make a guide on how to play it. But then if you didn't have these specific cards that I had, at that early stage, it would be difficult. And I would have to make, if I started to make quote unquote beginner guides, I would have to remake a new beginner guide based on somebody's new cards that they currently have. It's like, oh, I don't have Mime. I only have Bombardier and Sharpshooter. I can't use Harlequin because I didn't get Harlequin in my randoms. I only have the common cards. And you would have to just keep adjusting everything that you would have to keep adjusting a video every single time some new person that was a beginner as well, every time they said that they don't have this card or they don't have this card or they didn't get Mime yet. Or they didn't get Engineer, I instead have these other cards. Or I didn't get Dryad, or I don't have Boreas, I have these other cards. I have Frost and Demonologist. What should I do with Frost and Demonologist? I don't have Engineer. I have Engineer, but I don't have Harlequin, I don't have Dryad. Like the amount of combinations that you could potentially get over the course of this game, especially early on, is insanity. And so I feel like I, as a YouTuber, am a mid-tier level player. I am not by any means a whale. Like, I'm not an A-Friend Gaming. I'm not a Muck. I am not a Godlike Mike. All of these top-tier level players that have max level everything, I am not there. I have one max unit, and that is a max Blade Dancer, and it's because I spent a lot of investment very early on into it. That entire deck, like, I think I have a 13... Knight Statue, I have a 13 Scrapper. I invested very heavily into Blade Dancer, and that's not even to say that Blade Dancer is the best card. It's never been a meta card. I feel like I am more comfortable answering mid-tier level questions than I am answering beginner-based questions. Because I feel like as a beginner, if you are starting this game, I feel like you need to play the game in order to get better at the game. I, as a content creator, would love to help somebody who is a beginner, but at the same time, there's a part of me that also wants you to make mistakes, so that you understand that they are mistakes. And making a beginner guide, and then having mid-tier level people like me, like Games by the Beach, having people like us, where we are mid-tier level players, making guides, and then going to like an A-Friend Gaming, where he's making like maxed out everything guides, right? I feel like there's a part of me that allows you, that if you were to do it that way, it would allow you to never play the game yourself. And I think that a lot of this game is just about playing the game. But yeah, that's my thoughts. And if you think, or if this video that you're watching right now, it is a 1 trillion damage Demon Hunter game posted by Slather. It's one of the only videos he's posted. All credit goes to him because the gameplay is his. I just wanted to post it because when Demon Hunter inevitably gets nerfed in this next patch and people complain, I wanted to have something on my own YouTube channel that states that yes, it did need to get nerfed because a unit dealing 1 trillion damage in a mirror match means that it can deal 1 trillion damage, and that is not healthy for the meta. It's not healthy for anything. Because that means that if your deck can't do 1 trillion damage, you will lose to this. And since there's not a large pool of decks doing 1 trillion damage right now, I feel like that means that this deck needs to get nerfed. Or Demon Hunter needs to get nerfed. I believe that Sword is also going to get nerfed as well. But yeah, if you want to see the rest of this video, I guess that was pretty much the majority of me and what I wanted this video to be. And even at that, this video is, or this match goes on for 30 more minutes. Yeah, so go subscribe to Slather. You can watch this video on his. But yeah, just to give you a preview of the end of this video. What is this? 259? 259? Yeah. 259 stacks. 287 stacks. This is not a good meta to be in. But yeah. I'll talk to you guys next video.